The sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform that had been hastily constructed in the center of Copper Creek. A crowd had gathered, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity, righteous indignation, and quiet sorrow. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory was a place where laws were still being written in blood, and justice often came at the end of a rope. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Two figures stood upon the gallows, their hands bound behind their backs. One was Ethan Montgomery, the only son of the most powerful cattle rancher in the territory. The other was Kaya Redbird, daughter of Chief Blackhawk of the Chiricahua Apache. Their crime was simple, yet, in the eyes of both their peoples, unforgivable. They had dared to love across boundaries that generations of hatred had drawn. As the executioner approached, Ethan's eyes found Kaya's. In that moment, despite everything, a smile passed between them, a reminder that what they had discovered together was worth any price, even this one. But the story of how they came to stand together at the gallows begins 4 seasons earlier, when two worlds collided in ways no one could have predicted. Spring, 1877, Montgomery Ranch, Arizona Territory. Ethan Montgomery dug his heels into the sides of his chestnut stallion and felt the powerful muscles beneath him respond. At 23, he knew every inch of his father's 20,000 acres, better than he knew the calluses on his own hands. The Montgomery Ranch was the crown jewel of the Arizona Territory, stretching from the grasslands of the Eastern Plateau to the edge of Apache territory in the mountains. "You're pushing too hard, Ethan," called James Wilson, the ranch foreman, who had taught Ethan to ride when his legs could barely straddle a pony. "Save something for the way back." Ethan waved without looking behind him. He'd been restless all spring, feeling increasingly suffocated by the weight of expectations his father placed on his shoulders. Jackson Montgomery had built his empire from nothing, arriving in the territory with just a wagon, a rifle, and an iron determination that bordered on cruelty when crossed. "One day all of this will be yours," his father had told him countless times, sweeping his arm across the vista of their land. What Jackson never seemed to understand was that Ethan had never asked for an empire. He wanted something his father considered far more dangerous: freedom. The stallion crested a hill, and Ethan pulled back on the reins, coming to a stop at his favorite spot on the entire ranch. From here, he could see the distant peaks where the Apache made their home. His father and the other ranchers spoke of them as savages, obstacles to progress that would eventually be cleared away like the mesquite and sagebrush they had removed to make way for cattle. Ethan had met exactly one Apache in his life, an old medicine man who had wandered onto their property when Ethan was 12. Before his father's men could chase him off, or worse, the old man had locked eyes with young Ethan and said something in his native tongue that Ethan couldn't understand. But the intensity of the moment had stayed with him all these years. "You're a dreamer, Montgomery," Ethan muttered to himself, echoing the words his father often spat at him in disappointment. As Ethan turned to head back, something caught his eye: movement along the creek that marked the edge of their property. Curious, he guided his horse down the hillside. As he drew closer, he realized it was a person, a woman, kneeling by the water. His first thought was that she must be lost. This portion of the creek was miles from town, and no settlers lived this far out. Then, as he approached within 50 yards, he realized with a start that she was Apache. Ethan froze, uncertain. His father's standing orders were clear. Any Apache found on Montgomery land was to be driven off immediately. But something made him hesitate. She hadn't seen him yet, and there was a serene grace to her movements as she filled a small clay pot with water. His horse betrayed him with a soft nickering. The woman's head snapped up, and for a breathless moment they stared at each other across the distance. She was young, perhaps 20, with high cheekbones and eyes like polished obsidian. Her long black hair was partially braided, with small turquoise beads woven into the plaits. She wore a deerskin dress, adorned with intricate beadwork that marked her as someone of importance among her people. Instead of running as he expected, she rose slowly to her feet, her chin lifting in defiance. This was Apache water before it. "Was yours," she said in perfect, if accented, English. The unexpectedness of her speaking English left Ethan momentarily speechless. I'm not here to chase you off," he finally managed. "Then why are you here, Montgomery?" she asked. And the fact that she knew his name sent a chill down his spine. "How do you know who I am?" A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Everyone knows the Montgomery land, and you look like your father." Ethan winced at the comparison. "I'm nothing like my father." "So you say." She picked up her water pot. "Yet here you are, on stolen land, deciding whether to be merciful to an Apache who dares to drink from a creek." Her words stung with truth. "What's your name?" he asked, changing the subject. She hesitated, clearly debating whether to answer. "Kaya," she finally said. "Kaya Redbird." "I'm Ethan." "I know who you are," she repeated, but some of the edge had gone from her voice. Before either could say more, the sound of hoofbeats approached from behind Ethan. He turned to see James Wilson and 2 ranch hands cresting the hill. "Ethan," Wilson called out, "you all right?" Ethan turned back quickly. "You should go," he told Kaya urgently. She was already backing away. "We will meet again, Ethan Montgomery," she said, and something in her voice made it sound more like a prophecy than a casual farewell. By the time Wilson and the others reached him, Kaya had vanished into the brush along the creek. "Was that an Apache?" Wilson asked, his hand already moving to the rifle in his saddle holster. "Just a traveler passing through," Ethan lied. "I told them this was private property." Wilson looked skeptical, but nodded. "Your father's looking for you. Delegation from the territorial governor is visiting tonight. He wants you cleaned up and at dinner." Ethan suppressed a groan. Another evening of political maneuvering and thinly veiled threats wrapped in the language of progress and civilization. "Tell him I'll be there," Ethan said, his mind still on the woman by the creek. "The problem, Governor, is that we cannot develop this territory properly while hostiles still roam free." Jackson Montgomery's voice boomed across the dining table. At 55, he was still an imposing figure, 6'3" with shoulders like an oak beam and a beard that had more iron than silver in it despite his age. Ethan picked at his food, only half listening to the same conversation his father had been having with various officials for as long as he could remember. The territorial governor, a small man with enormous political ambitions named Harlan Fletcher, nodded along enthusiastically. "President Hayes is committed to a peaceful resolution, but I believe we can persuade Washington that more decisive action is needed," Fletcher responded. "The cavalry at Fort Benton is undermanned," added Colonel William Garrett, whose polished buttons gleamed in the lamplight. "If we had another 100 men, we could push the remaining hostiles onto the reservation within 6 months." "Or into the ground," muttered Thomas Burke, a neighboring rancher whose hatred of the Apache was legendary even in a territory where such sentiments were common. "What about the peace treaty?" Ethan found himself asking, drawing surprised looks from around the table. His father's face darkened. "The Apache broke the peace when they raided the Sullivan homestead last month." "We don't know that it was Chiricahua," Ethan countered. "The Army report said, I don't need a report to tell me what I already know," Jackson cut him off. "The Apache understands only one thing, son, and that's force. When you run this ranch, you'll understand that." The conversation moved on, but Margaret Montgomery, Ethan's mother, noticed the storm brewing on her son's face. Unlike her husband, she had always seen the sensitivity in Ethan that Jackson tried to crush out of him. Later, as the men retired to the study for brandy and cigars, Margaret found Ethan on the veranda, staring out at the moonlit landscape. "Your father means well," she said softly, joining him at the railing. "He's trying to prepare you." "For what? To continue a war that never needed to be fought?" Ethan asked. Margaret sighed. "This land has seen bloodshed since long before we arrived, Ethan. The Apache fought the Mexican settlers, who fought the Spanish, who fought whoever came before them. It's the way of the frontier." "It doesn't have to be," Ethan insisted. "There's enough land for everyone if we just—" "Careful," Margaret warned, as the door to the house opened and Jackson emerged with the governor and colonel. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Ethan," his father called. "Colonel Garrett was just saying he could use young men like you in the cavalry. Good horsemanship runs in your blood." Ethan forced a polite smile. "I believe my place is here learning the ranch, sir, as you've always said." Jackson clapped him on the shoulder with enough force to make him wince. "That's my boy, though a stint in the military might put some steel in your spine." After the guests departed, Jackson cornered Ethan in the study. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said without preamble. "By asking about a peace treaty our government signed?" Ethan challenged. Jackson's face reddened. "By questioning me in front of the governor and suggesting we should coddle those who would just as soon cut our throats. You don't know them, father. You've never even tried to understand them." "I understand them better than you think," Jackson growled. "I buried your uncle after the Apaches left him staked out in the sun. I held your cousin Sarah after raiders. Took her parents. Don't tell me what I don't know." "That was 15 years ago," Ethan argued. "Chief Blackhawk has kept his people at peace since the treaty." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "What do you know of Blackhawk?" Ethan realized his mistake too late. He knew the chief's name only from whispered conversations among the ranch hands. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just what people say in town." "Stay away from Apache business, Ethan," Jackson warned. "I've worked too hard building this legacy to have you throw it away on misguided sympathy." After his father left, Ethan remained in the study, his mind drifting back to the woman at the creek. Kaya Redbird. Something about her had awakened a curiosity in him that he couldn't shake. Ethan guided his wagon through the dusty streets of Copper Creek, a settlement that had sprung up around a small copper mine and now served as the trading hub for the surrounding ranches. His mother had given him a list of supplies, but his real reason for volunteering for the trip was to escape the ranch for a day. The trading post was operated by Samuel Harris, a former prospector who had found more profit in selling supplies than in searching for ore. Harris was one of the few men in the territory who traded freely with both settlers and Apache, earning him suspicious glances from men like Ethan's father, but a steady income from all sides. "Young Montgomery," Harris greeted him as Ethan entered the dimly lit store. "What brings you to my humble establishment?" Ethan handed over the list. "The usual supplies." "And I was wondering," Harris raised an eyebrow. "Yes? Do you ever trade with Chief Blackhawk's people?" The storekeeper's expression grew guarded. "On occasion. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Ethan said, trying to sound casual. "Father says they're all savages, but I've heard Blackhawk is different." Harris studied him for a long moment before responding. "Your father and men like him see the world in simple terms, Ethan. The Apache have their own laws, their own customs. Different doesn't mean savage." As Harris gathered the supplies, Ethan browsed the store, pausing at a display of silver and turquoise jewelry crafted by native artisans. A small bracelet caught his eye, its pattern similar to the beadwork he had seen on Kaya's dress. "I'll take this too," he said impulsively, adding it to his purchases. As Harris wrapped the bracelet, the door opened and several people entered. Ethan turned and felt his heart skip a beat. Among them was Kaya Redbird, accompanied by two Apache men whose stern expressions and watchful eyes marked them as warriors. Their eyes met, and for a moment Kaya looked as surprised as he felt. Then her expression became carefully neutral. "Miss Redbird," Harris greeted her. "I have the medicine your father requested." One of the warriors spoke sharply in Apache, clearly unhappy about Ethan's presence. "It's all right, Nashoba," Kaya replied in English. "Mr. Montgomery was just leaving." Ethan stood his ground. "Actually, I'm still waiting for my supplies." Harris, sensing the tension, hurried to finish Ethan's order while simultaneously retrieving a package for Kaya. The small trading post suddenly felt crowded with unspoken hostilities. "Your father is well?" Harris asked Kaya as he handed over a small burlap sack. "The fever comes and goes," she replied. "The medicine you provided last month helped." Ethan's ears perked up at this information. "Your father is ill." The warrior called Nashoba stepped forward. "Our chief's health is not the concern of a Montgomery," he said coldly. "Nashoba," Kaya said sharply. "Respect." To Ethan's surprise, the warrior backed down, though his eyes remained hostile. An idea formed in Ethan's mind. "Mr. Harris," he said, "please add whatever medicines Miss Redbird needs to my account." All eyes turned to him in shock. "Why would you do this?" Kaya asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "Consider it a gesture of goodwill," Ethan replied. "We do not need Montgomery charity," Nashoba spat. "It's not charity," Ethan insisted. "It's acknowledging that we all share this land, whether my father likes it or not." Kaya studied him intently, as if trying to decipher some hidden motive. Finally, she nodded to Harris. "We accept," she said, ignoring Nashoba's look of outrage. As they were leaving, Kaya paused beside Ethan. "The creek where we met," she said quietly. "Tomorrow at midday." Then she was gone, following her companions out into the bright sunlight. Harris whistled softly. "You're playing with fire, boy." Ethan picked up his purchases, including the bracelet. "Sometimes fire is the only thing that can clear away what's dead and make room for new growth." The storekeeper shook his head. "Poetic, but it'll be your funeral pyre if your father finds out you're fraternizing with Black Hawk's daughter." Ethan nearly dropped the package. "His daughter. Kaya is the chief's daughter." Harris grimaced. "You didn't know. Boy, whatever you're thinking, stop now. That girl isn't just any Apache. She's practically royalty among them, and with tensions as they are." But Ethan was barely listening, his mind already racing ahead to tomorrow's meeting by the creek. Ethan arrived at the creek early, his mind racing with the revelation that Kaya was Chief Blackhawk's daughter. He had hidden his horse in a stand of cottonwoods, and now sat on a boulder at the water's edge, listening to the gentle babbling of the creek and the occasional call of a desert bird. He wasn't entirely sure she would come. For all he knew, this could be a trap, though something in his gut told him otherwise. There had been a genuine curiosity in Kaya's eyes that mirrored his own. The sun reached its zenith, beating down mercilessly on the Arizona landscape. Just as Ethan began to think he had been stood up, a slight movement in the brush across the creek caught his eye. Kaya emerged alone this time, dressed in a simpler deerskin dress than before, her hair pulled back with a single band decorated with an eagle feather. "You came," she said, sounding mildly surprised as she crossed the shallow creek, her moccasins barely getting damp as she stepped precisely on exposed stones. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Ethan asked, standing to greet her. "I thought perhaps your courage might fail you." A hint of challenge sparkled in her dark eyes. "It is one thing to act boldly in a trading post, another to meet an Apache alone. Is that how your people see it? Because mine would say I'm the one taking the risk," Ethan countered, though his tone remained light. Kaya moved past him to sit on the boulder he had vacated. "Your father has killed more Apache than my father has killed white men." The bluntness of her statement took Ethan aback. "My father fought in the wars, yes, but—" "They were not wars," Kaya interrupted. "Wars are fought between equals. What your people did to mine was conquest." Ethan fell silent, unsure how to respond. He had never heard anyone speak so directly about the violence that had shaped the territory. "Why did you help us at the trading post?" Kaya asked, changing the subject. "And do not say goodwill again. I want the truth." Ethan sat down on a smaller rock near her. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe because it seemed like the right thing to do. Maybe because it would anger my father if he knew." He paused, then added more softly, "Or maybe because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since we met." Kaya's expression remained unreadable. "Your honesty is unexpected." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "Why did you ask me to meet you here?" "Curiosity," she replied. "You are not what I expected from Jackson Montgomery's son. When you did not raise the alarm upon seeing me at the creek, when you spoke of peace treaties at the trading post, I wanted to understand. And do you understand me, I mean?" Kaya shook her head. "Not yet, but I am beginning to think we may be alike in some ways. Both of us are caught between worlds." "What do you mean?" She gazed out across the landscape. "My father sends me to trade with whites because I speak English, because I attended the mission. School before my mother took me away again. Some of my people think this makes me tainted." A flash of vulnerability crossed her face before disappearing. "They whisper that I have forgotten the old ways." "And have you?" "No," Kaya said firmly. "I remember everything, the stories, the songs, the proper way to honor the spirits. But I also see what is coming. The railroads, the settlers, the soldiers, more every season." "And what do you think should be done?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "I think," she said carefully, "that the future will belong to those who can walk in both worlds without losing themselves." She turned to him with sudden intensity. "What about you, Ethan Montgomery? What future do you see?" Before he could answer, Ethan reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the small package he had brought. "I bought this yesterday," he said, offering it to her. "I saw it and thought of you." Kaya hesitated before taking the package and unwrapping it. The turquoise bracelet caught the sunlight, its silver setting gleaming. "This is Apache work," she said, examining it. "Old stones. Do you like it?" "It is beautiful," she admitted, "but I cannot accept such a gift." "Why not? Among my people, gifts have meaning. To accept this would suggest—" She trailed off. "What?" "That there is something between us, an understanding, a possibility." Her eyes met his. "Is that what you intend?" Ethan swallowed, suddenly aware of how dangerous this ground was. "I don't know what I intend. I just know I want to see you again." Kaya held the bracelet out to return it, but then slowly withdrew her hand. "I will keep it, but not wear it. Not yet." She tucked it into a small pouch at her waist. "We should not meet here again. It is too exposed." "Where then?" She pointed east toward the mountains. "There is a place, an old hunting camp in a box canyon. No one has used it since the drought 3 summers ago." She described landmarks that would lead him there. 3 days from now, when the moon is half full. "I'll be there," Ethan promised. As they parted ways, neither noticed the distant figure on horseback watching from the ridgeline above. Thomas Burke, their neighbor whose hatred of the Apache was matched only by his loyalty to Jackson Montgomery. Dinner at the Montgomery table that night was tense. Jackson seemed preoccupied, barely touching his food as Margaret tried to maintain conversation. Ethan noticed his father's mood, but attributed it to business concerns. "The cattle drive to the railhead begins next week," Jackson finally said. "I want you to lead it, Ethan." Ethan nearly choked on his food. The drive was the most important operation of the year, taking 1,000 head of cattle to the nearest railroad connection for shipment east. It was a 2-week journey each way, and his father had never trusted him with such responsibility before. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Ethan asked. Jackson's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's time you took on more responsibility, unless you have other plans." There was something in his father's tone that made Ethan uneasy. "No, no other plans," he lied. "I'm honored you'd trust me with the drive." "Trust must be earned," Jackson replied pointedly, and maintained. Before Ethan could decipher his father's meaning, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of James Wilson, who entered after a cursory knock. "Sorry to disturb dinner, but Burke is here. Says it's urgent." Jackson wiped his mouth and stood. "Show him in." Thomas Burke entered, removing his hat. His eyes flickered briefly to Ethan before addressing Jackson. "I need to speak with you, privately." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of my family," Jackson insisted. Burke hesitated. "It's about Apache movements near the eastern boundary. Might be sensitive information." Jackson studied Burke for a moment, then nodded. "My office." As they left, Ethan felt a chill of apprehension. Had Burke seen his meeting with Kaya? The timing was too coincidental. "Your father seems concerned about something," Margaret observed after they'd gone. "It's probably nothing," Ethan said, trying to convince himself as much as his mother. "Just the usual Apache paranoia." Margaret gave him a knowing look. "Your father's concerns about the Apache aren't paranoia, Ethan. There's history there you don't fully understand." "Then help me understand it," Ethan challenged. "All my life I've heard about the savage Apache, but father never explains why he hates them so much." Margaret sighed deeply. "It wasn't just your uncle's death. Before you were born, when we first came to the territory, your father and I had a daughter." Ethan stared at her in shock. "What?" "I had a sister. Her name was Rebecca. She was 3 years old when Apache raiders attacked our first home instead. It was a different band, not Black Hawk's people, but—" Margaret's eyes grew distant with the memory. "They took her. We never found her body." "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your father forbade it. The loss nearly destroyed him. Building this ranch, focusing on you, becoming the strongest force in the territory. That was how he survived." She reached across the table to take his hand. "I'm telling you now so you understand that your father's hatred comes from a place of unimaginable pain." Ethan sat back, his mind reeling. This revelation cast his father's brutality toward the Apache in a new light. Not justified, but at least comprehensible. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling about the Apache," Margaret continued, her grip on his hand tightening, "be careful, Ethan. Your father would never recover from losing another child." Before Ethan could respond, Jackson returned to the dining room, his face like thunder. Burke was nowhere to be seen. "The cattle drive leaves in 2 days," Jackson announced. "We're moving it up. There are reports of Apache war parties moving closer to our grazing lands." 2 days, Ethan repeated. "But we're not ready." "Then get ready," Jackson snapped. "This isn't a debate." Ethan knew immediately what this meant. He would miss his planned meeting with Kaya in the Box Canyon. The drive would take him in the opposite direction and keep him away for at least a month. "Yes, sir," he said, hiding his disappointment. Jackson studied him for a moment longer. "Wilson will oversee preparations tomorrow. You and I are riding to Fort Benton to speak with Colonel Garrett." "Why?" Ethan asked, immediately suspicious. "Because I said so," Jackson replied coldly. "Be ready at dawn." Fort Benton stood as a symbol of American military presence in the territory, a square arrangement of wooden buildings surrounded by a palisade wall. The cavalry stationed there had the dual mission of protecting settlers and managing Indian affairs. A euphemism that everyone understood meant keeping the native populations contained and controlled. Colonel William Garrett met them in his office, a Spartan room whose only decoration was a large map of the territory with colored pins indicating Apache movement. "Jackson, good to see you," Garrett greeted them, shaking Montgomery's hand firmly before nodding to Ethan. "And young Mr. Montgomery as well. What brings you both to my humble outpost?" "I need information, William," Jackson said without preamble. "Burke tells me there's been increased Apache activity along my eastern boundary. Is Black Hawk breaking the treaty?" Garrett sighed, moving to the map. "Not officially, no, but we've seen more hunting parties ranging further from their territory." He pointed to several red pins. "And there's something else. 3 raids in the past month on isolated homesteads." "Black Hawk's people?" Jackson demanded. "We don't think so. The attacks bear the hallmarks of the renegade band led by Broken Knife. They broke from Black Hawk's leadership last winter, remember? About 20 warriors and their families." Ethan felt a surge of relief. If the attacks weren't connected to Black Hawk's people, then Kaya's community wasn't involved. "What's Black Hawk doing about it?" Jackson asked. "Nothing," Garrett replied. "He claims Broken Knife is no longer his responsibility." "Convenient," Jackson muttered. "Actually," Garrett continued, "we've received intelligence that there's discord among the Chiricahua. Black Hawk is ill, apparently. His leadership is being challenged by some of the younger warriors who think he's grown too accommodating to whites." Ethan remembered Kaya mentioning her father's illness at the trading post, and his stomach tightened with worry. "If Black Hawk falls," Garrett added grimly, "we could have a full-scale uprising on our hands." Jackson turned to Ethan. "This is why we've moved up the cattle drive. I want our herd safely away from here if trouble breaks out." Ethan nodded, but his mind was racing. He needed to warn Kaya, to find out if her people were truly on the brink of war. "Colonel," Ethan spoke up, "has anyone from the fort tried to communicate directly with Black Hawk? To offer assistance, perhaps?" Both men looked at him as if he'd suggested they fly to the moon. "Assist the Apache?" Garrett laughed incredulously. "Why would we do that?" "Because a stable Black Hawk is better than a war with whoever replaces him," Ethan pointed out. Jackson's expression darkened. "My son fancies himself a diplomat," he said to Garrett. "He's yet to learn that you can't negotiate with people who see compromise as weakness." "Actually," Garrett said slowly, "the idea has merit. Not assistance, perhaps, but communication. I've been considering sending a message to Black Hawk, assessing the situation firsthand." "And who would deliver this message?" Jackson scoffed. "No white man can enter their territory without risking his scalp." "We have scouts, interpreters," Garrett replied. "I could go," Ethan said impulsively. Both men stared at him. "Absolutely not," Jackson said flatly. "Hear me out," Ethan insisted. "I'm not a soldier or a government official. I'm young, less threatening. If I went unarmed as a gesture of good faith—" "You'd be dead before sundown," his father interrupted. "Not necessarily," Garrett mused, studying Ethan with new interest. "An unofficial envoy, a civilian, it might just work. The Montgomery name carries weight." "The Montgomery name is precisely why they'd kill him on sight," Jackson countered. "Have you forgotten what happened to my brother? That was 15 years ago," Ethan echoed his earlier argument. "And it wasn't Black Hawk's people." Jackson turned on him. "You know nothing about it." "Perhaps not," Ethan admitted. "But I know that endless cycles of vengeance solve nothing. This could be a chance to prevent bloodshed." An uncomfortable silence fell over the office. Finally, Garrett spoke. "Why don't I consider all options and consult with the governor?" "In the meantime, Jackson, moving your herd is a sensible precaution." Jackson nodded stiffly. "My son will be leading the drive. He leaves tomorrow." "Actually," Garrett said, "if I do decide to pursue this diplomatic approach, having young Montgomery available might be useful." "The drive can't wait," Jackson insisted. "Wilson could lead it," Ethan suggested. "He has more experience anyway. He could see his father struggling with the decision, torn between his desire to keep Ethan away from Apache territory and the colonel's interest in his diplomatic suggestion." "I'll consider it," Jackson finally said, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "We should return to the ranch." As they rode back in silence, Ethan knew his impulsive offer had created both an opportunity and a grave risk. If he could convince his father and Colonel Garrett to let him act as an envoy, he would have a legitimate reason to enter Apache territory and to see Kaya again. But if his true motives were discovered, or worse, if he was walking into a genuine war brewing among the Apache, Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by his father's voice, cold and precise. "Whatever game you're playing, son, end it now." "I don't know what you mean," Ethan replied, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. "Burke saw you yesterday," Jackson said bluntly, "with an Apache woman at our creek." Ethan's blood ran cold, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I encountered one of them getting water. I told her to move along." "That's not how Burke described it," Jackson countered. "He said you were sitting together, talking, like friends." The disgust in his voice was palpable. "Burke has always had an overactive imagination," Ethan deflected, "and a desire to curry favor with you." Jackson ruined his horse to a stop, forcing Ethan to do the same. "Look me in the eye and tell me you have no interest in that Apache girl." Ethan met his father's gaze steadily. "Her name is Kaya," he said quietly, "and she's Chief Black Hawk's daughter." The color drained from Jackson's face. "Have you lost your mind?" "Maybe I've finally found it," Ethan replied. "She's not what you think. None of them are what you think." "You know nothing about them," Jackson hissed. "Nothing! Then educate me," Ethan challenged. "Mother told me about Rebecca. I understand your hatred now, but don't you dare speak her name." Jackson cut him off, his voice shaking with rage. "And don't presume to understand anything about me or my reasons. Then help me understand why continuing this cycle of hatred is better than trying to end it," Ethan pressed. Jackson's expression hardened. "You will leave with the cattle drive tomorrow. When you return, if you've come to your senses, we'll never speak of this again. If not—" He left the threat unfinished. "And if I refuse to go," Ethan asked, "then you are no longer my son," Jackson said simply, "and no longer welcome on my land." With that, he spurred his horse forward, leaving Ethan alone on the trail with an impossible choice. Nightfall shrouded the narrow entrance to the box canyon in deep shadows. Ethan dismounted, leading his horse carefully over the rocky terrain. The half-moon provided just enough light to navigate, but not enough to make him an easy target if anyone was watching. His decision to defy his father had not come easily. The cattle drive had departed that morning with James Wilson in charge, and Jackson Montgomery's fury hanging over the ranch like a thundercloud. Ethan had announced his intentions at breakfast. He was riding to Fort Benton to volunteer as colonel, Garrett's envoy to the Apache. "You'll regret this choice for the rest of your days," his father had warned, his voice devoid of emotion. His mother had followed him to the stables, her eyes pleading. "Whatever you're searching for, Ethan, I pray you find it. But please, be careful." Now, as he tied his horse to a scrubby juniper and continued on foot, Ethan wondered if he had made the gravest mistake of his life. The box canyon Kaya had described lay before him, a natural fortress whose steep walls protected a small plateau with a spring-fed pool at its center. No fire burned to guide him, but as he approached the pool, a figure emerged from behind a large boulder. "You came!" Kaya's voice held surprise and something else, relief, perhaps. "I did not think you would." "I almost didn't," Ethan admitted. "My father knows about our meeting at the creek." Alarm flickered across her face. "How?" "Burke saw us. And now my father has given me an ultimatum. Abandon any contact with you and your people, or leave his home forever." Kaya's expression softened. "Yet you are here." "I am," Ethan confirmed. "Though I told my father I was going to Fort Benton to volunteer as an envoy to your people." Colonel Garrett seemed interested in the idea. An envoy? Kaya's brow furrowed. Why? Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. There are concerns about your father's health, about stability among your people. The army fears that if his leadership is challenged, war would return. Kaya finished for him. She turned away, staring into the pool. They are not wrong to worry. Is it that serious? She nodded grimly. My father grows weaker each day. The medicine helps but cannot cure him. And Nashoba, the warrior you met at the trading post, leads those who think my father has grown too soft. She glanced at Ethan. They would drive all white settlers from our ancestral lands. That would mean war, Ethan said. A war your people cannot win. Some would rather die fighting than live constrained, Kaya replied. They see the reservation as a slow death anyway. And what do you think? Ethan asked, moving closer to her. I think both paths lead to suffering, she said softly. But one offers at least the chance of survival. They sat together beside the pool, the silence between them comfortable despite the weight of their conversation. After a while, Kaya reached into a pouch at her waist and withdrew the bracelet Ethan had given her. I have worn it, she admitted, slipping it onto her wrist. Though only when alone, Ethan smiled. It suits you. In our tradition, to accept such a gift means something specific, she explained. It suggests a courtship has begun. And has it? Ethan asked, his heart beating faster. Kaya met his gaze steadily. We both know where this path leads, Ethan Montgomery. Nowhere good. Maybe, he acknowledged. Or maybe we're the beginning of something new, something better. She laughed softly. You have the optimism of someone who has never truly suffered. Then teach me, he said, taking her hand impulsively. Share your knowledge, your traditions. Let me understand your world. Kaya looked down at their joined hands. And what will you teach me in return? Whatever you wish to know, he promised. She seemed to consider this for a moment before standing and leading him further into the canyon. First, I will show you something few white men have ever seen. At the far end of the canyon, nearly invisible, in the moonlight, was a small opening in the rock face. Kaya retrieved a torch from inside, lighting it with practiced efficiency. Follow me, she instructed, ducking into what appeared to be a narrow cave. Ethan hesitated only briefly before following her. The passage widened almost immediately into a small chamber, its walls covered with ancient paintings. Animals, human figures, geometric patterns, all rendered in ochre, white and black pigments. My ancestors left these marks centuries ago, Kaya explained, holding the torch higher. This place is sacred to us, a place of visions and guidance. Ethan moved slowly around the chamber, marveling at the artwork. It's incredible, he murmured. How old are these? Some were made before the Spanish came, Kaya said. Others are newer. Each generation adds its story. She pointed to a series of figures. This tells of the first meeting between my people and yours. The painting depicted mounted men with what looked like rifles confronting figures with bows. Between them was a larger figure with arms outstretched. A peacemaker, Ethan guessed. Kaya nodded. My great-grandfather. He believed coexistence was possible. Her voice carried a note of sadness. He was killed by soldiers 2 winters later. She moved to another section of wall that appeared newer, the pigments more vivid. My father added these when he became chief, his vision for our future. These images showed Apache and white figures standing together with symbols Ethan didn't recognize surrounding them. What do these mean? He asked, pointing to the symbols. Balance. Harmony. The interconnection of all things, Kaya explained. My father believes our peoples are like the juniper and the prickly pear, different in every way, yet both surviving in the same harsh land because each has found its own way to draw life from it. A wise man, Ethan observed. Yes, Kaya agreed, which is why Neshoba and his followers will wait until he is gone before acting. They honor him too much to challenge him directly while he lives. How much time does he have? Kaya's expression grew guarded. The medicine man says before the winter. Ethan absorbed this sobering information. Then we have until then to find another way, a path that doesn't lead to war. What way could there possibly be? Kaya asked skeptically. Your father and men like him will never accept us as equals. Perhaps not, Ethan conceded, but others might. Colonel Garrett seemed open to diplomacy. The territorial governor answers to Washington, where some speak of Indian rights. If we could bring your father and Representative Whites together, create a new agreement. Kaya studied him in the torchlight. You truly believe this is possible? I have to, Ethan replied simply. The alternative is unthinkable. She reached up, her fingers gently touching his cheek. Your hope is like water in the desert, Ethan Montgomery, precious and rare. Without thinking, Ethan leaned forward and kissed her. For a heartbeat, Kaya remained still. Then she responded, her lips soft against his. When they finally parted, her eyes reflected both wonder and fear. That was unwise, she whispered. Then I choose to be unwise, Ethan replied, drawing her closer. Kaya rested her head against his chest. If anyone knew, no one knows, he assured her. Just us and the ancient ones watching from these walls. She pulled back, her expression serious. We must be careful, more than careful. If Neshoba suspected, he would use it against my father. And your father. Let me worry about my father, Ethan said. For now, can we just have this moment? This place. Kaya's smile held a tinge of sadness. Yes, tonight this place is ours alone. Jackson Montgomery sat alone in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. The room was dark except for a single lamp, shadows dancing on the walls with every flicker of the flame. A knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. Enter, he called. Thomas Burke stepped in, removing his hat. Evening, Jackson. Just got back from town. Any word? Jackson asked, his voice tight. Burke nodded. Your boy's at Fort Benton, right enough? Garrett's given him some kind of assignment. Scouting, they say. Jackson's hand tightened around his glass. Scouting what? Apache territory, Burke replied, watching his friend's reaction carefully. Word is he's heading out with Lieutenant Scott tomorrow. Something about establishing communication with Black Hawk's people. Damn him, Jackson muttered. Damn them, both. There's more, Burke said, his tone growing hesitant. Rumors around the trading post. Harris won't confirm anything, but my sources say your boy's been seen with an Apache woman. More than once. Jackson's face remained impassive, but the glass in his hand shattered, sending whiskey and blood across the polished desk. Sir, your hand. Burke started, stepping forward. Leave it, Jackson ordered, wrapping a handkerchief around his bleeding palm without flinching. Tell me everything you know. Leave nothing out. Burke shifted uncomfortably. They say it's Black Hawk's daughter, the one they call Kaya. A cold, terrible stillness came over Jackson. Black Hawk's daughter, he repeated, the words like ice. Jackson, if the boy's just trying to establish diplomatic ties, my son has always been soft, Jackson interrupted. Impressionable, idealistic to the point of foolishness. He stood abruptly. But this goes beyond youthful rebellion. This is betrayal. What will you do? Burke asked. Jackson moved to the window, staring out at the darkness as if he could see all the way to Fort Benton. First, I need to know exactly what he's planning. Send 2 of our men to follow him, discreetly. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he meets. And then, Jackson turned, his face set in grim determination. Then I'll decide whether I still have a son. The journey to Shadow Canyon had been uneventful, though Ethan couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Lieutenant Scott moved with the easy confidence of a man familiar with the wilderness, pointing out signs of Apache passage that Ethan would have missed entirely. A bent twig here, an arranged pattern of stones there. "Remember," Scott cautioned, as they approached the canyon entrance, "let me do the talking initially. When I give the signal, you can speak, but keep it simple and direct. Show respect, but not subservience." Ethan nodded, adjusting the medicine pouch Kaya had given him so that it was clearly visible on his chest. Scott had noticed it earlier but hadn't commented, though his raised eyebrow suggested he recognized its significance. Shadow Canyon earned its name from the towering walls that blocked the sun, except for a few hours at midday. As they entered, the temperature dropped noticeably. Scott led them to a small clearing beside a spring-fed pool, similar to the one in the Box Canyon where Ethan had met Kaya. "Now we wait," Scott said, dismounting. "They already know we're here." "How can you be sure?" Ethan asked, scanning the seemingly empty canyon. Scott gestured toward a high ridge. "3 scouts have been tracking us since dawn. If they meant us harm, we'd already be dead." The casual way he delivered this information sent a chill down Ethan's spine. They watered their horses and settled in to wait, Scott sitting cross-legged with the patience of a man accustomed to the rhythms of the wilderness. After nearly an hour, a bird call echoed through the canyon, too regular to be natural. Scott stood slowly, raising his empty hands to shoulder height. Ethan followed suit. 3 Apache warriors materialized from the rocks above, descending with remarkable agility. Ethan's heart sank when he recognized the leader, Nashoba, the hostile warrior from the trading post. Nashoba's eyes narrowed when he spotted Ethan, his hand reflexively moving to the knife at his belt. "Lieutenant Scott," he acknowledged in accented English, deliberately ignoring Ethan. "You come armed to our hunting grounds, only for protection on the journey," Scott replied calmly. "We seek peaceful talk with Chief Blackhawk." Nashoba's gaze flicked to the medicine pouch around Ethan's neck, his expression darkening. "Where did you get that, Montgomery?" Before Ethan could answer, Scott intervened. "We bring a message from Colonel Garrett at Fort Benton. He wishes to meet with Blackhawk to discuss mutual concerns." "What concerns can whites and Apache possibly share?" Nashoba asked coldly. "Peace," Ethan said, earning a warning glance from Scott, "and the threat of those who would destroy it." Nashoba stepped closer, his face inches from Ethan's. "You speak of peace while wearing our sacred medicine? Who gave you the right?" "It was a gift," Ethan replied steadily, "freely given." The 2 other warriors exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by this revelation. "By whom?" Nashoba demanded. Scott placed a restraining hand on Ethan's arm. "We've come in good faith, Nashoba. Will you take our message to Blackhawk or not?" After a tense moment, Nashoba stepped back. "I will tell him of your coming. Wait here." He turned to his companions and spoke rapidly in Apache. One nodded and slipped away, presumably to deliver the message. "He says we are to be watched," Scott translated quietly to Ethan, "and that if we attempt to leave before he returns, we will be considered spies." "How long will he be gone?" Ethan asked. "Their main camp is half a day's ride," Scott replied. "If Blackhawk agrees to see us, we'll be escorted there tomorrow." Nashoba approached again. "You," he said, pointing to Ethan. "The medicine pouch. Where did you get it?" Ethan met his gaze evenly. "I told you, it was a gift." "From Kaya Redbird," Nashoba stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't a question, but a confirmation. Ethan said nothing, which was answer enough. "She betrays her people by trusting Montgomery," Nashoba spat. "Her father's illness has clouded her judgment. Or perhaps cleared it," Ethan countered. "Chief Blackhawk has kept peace for 15 years. Kaya honors his wisdom by seeking to maintain it." Nashoba's hand moved to his knife again. "You know nothing of honor, white man, nothing of our ways." I'm willing to learn, Ethan replied. A mirthless smile crossed Neshoba's face. Yes, I have heard how eager you are to learn from Kaya. The innuendo was unmistakable. Scott intervened again. We'll make camp here and await your return, Neshoba. Please convey our respect to Chief Blackhawk. With a final venomous look at Ethan, Neshoba departed, leaving them with the remaining warrior, who positioned himself on a rock overlooking their position, his expression impassive. What just happened? Scott asked quietly as they began setting up camp. It's complicated, Ethan replied. Uncomplicated, Scott insisted. That medicine pouch is significant, and Neshoba clearly believes there's something between you and this Gaia Redbird. Ethan sighed, knowing he could no longer hide the truth from his companion. Kaya is Chief Blackhawk's daughter. We've met several times. She gave me the pouch as a sign of friendship. Friendship, Scott repeated skeptically. Montgomery, please tell me you haven't done anything stupid. Define stupid, Ethan said grimly. Scott ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Not just for you, but for her, for the peace of the entire territory. We've done nothing wrong, Ethan insisted. It's not wrong, Scott replied. It's about reality. You're Jackson Montgomery's son. She's Blackhawk's daughter. The political implications alone are explosive, never mind the cultural taboos you're violating. So we should all just stay in our separate corners, because that's how it's always been, Ethan challenged. Scott lowered his voice. Listen to me carefully. I've spent 10 years studying the Apache, learning their language, respecting their customs. I'm probably the most sympathetic white man to their cause in a 100-mile radius. And even I wouldn't dream of pursuing a romantic relationship with an Apache woman, especially not the daughter of a chief. I'm not pursuing anything, Ethan protested. We're just... He trailed off, unable to define exactly what he and Kaya were to each other. Getting involved, Scott finished for him, and potentially undermining any diplomatic progress we might make here. He stared at Ethan intently. Is that why you really volunteered for this mission? To see her again? Ethan couldn't deny it. Partly, but I also genuinely want to help. Prevent a war. Those two goals aren't mutually exclusive. They might be, Scott warned. If Neshoba uses your relationship with Kaya to challenge Blackhawk's leadership, you could be inadvertently pushing the Apache toward war, not away from it. The sobering possibility left Ethan silent. As night fell over Shadow Canyon, he found himself wondering if his selfish desire to see Kaya again might actually harm her and her people, the very opposite of what he had intended. Neshoba returned at dawn with 4 additional warriors and the news that Blackhawk would see them. They were blindfolded for part of the journey, a precaution Scott assured Ethan was standard procedure rather than a sign of particular distrust. When the blindfolds were removed, they found themselves approaching a well-hidden encampment nestled in a valley sheltered by dense pine forest. Dozens of conical dwellings formed concentric circles around a central clearing. Women paused in their work to watch the strangers pass. Children were hurriedly ushered inside, and warriors stood alert, their expressions wary. Remember, Scott murmured, follow my lead. Speak only when addressed directly. They were led to the largest dwelling at the center of the camp. Outside sat a frail-looking man wrapped in blankets despite the warm day. Chief Blackhawk was clearly ill, his once powerful frame diminished by sickness, but his eyes remained sharp and penetrating. Beside him stood Kaya, her face carefully composed, though Ethan detected a flicker of something, relief, perhaps, when she saw him. She wore a ceremonial dress adorned with intricate beadwork, her hair arranged more formally than he had seen before. In this setting, surrounded by the trappings of her culture, she seemed both familiar and suddenly foreign to him. Lieutenant Scott, Blackhawk greeted them in surprisingly strong English. It has been many seasons since you visited our camp. Scott, bowed respectfully. "Thank you for receiving us, Chief Blackhawk. May the spirits grant you healing." The chief acknowledged the blessing with a slight nod before turning his attention to Ethan. "In Jackson Montgomery's son. This is unexpected." "Mr. Montgomery serves as a civilian envoy," Scott explained. "He has expressed genuine interest in fostering peace between your people and the settlers." Blackhawk studied Ethan intently. "Have you indeed? Your father has never shown such interest." "I am not my father," Ethan said simply. A ghost of a smile crossed the chief's weathered face. "No, that much is clear." His gaze shifted to the medicine pouch around Ethan's neck. "You wear our medicine. Given by a member of my family, I think." Ethan glanced briefly at Kaya, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, Chief, a gesture of friendship that I deeply honor." "Perhaps more than friendship," Blackhawk mused, causing murmurs among the gathered Apache. Neshoba, standing at the chief's right, scowled openly. Scott stepped forward. "Chief Blackhawk, Colonel Garrett sends his respects and his concern about reports of increased raiding activity by Broken Knife's band." "Broken Knife is no longer of our people," Blackhawk said dismissively. "His actions are not our responsibility." "The army understands this," Scott assured him. "But there are concerns that if these raids continue, the territorial governor may pressure Washington to take broader action against all Apache in the region." "Politics," Blackhawk sighed. "Always politics." He gestured for a younger man to bring him water, drinking slowly before continuing. "What does Garrett propose?" "Joint patrols," Scott suggested. "Apache scouts working with cavalry to locate and neutralize Broken Knife's band. It would demonstrate your commitment to the peace treaty and protect your people from being blamed for his actions." Neshoba stepped forward angrily. "You ask us to help hunt other Apache? To be the white man's dog?" "I ask you to protect your own people," Scott countered, "from being punished for crimes they didn't commit." A tense silence fell over the gathering. Finally, Blackhawk raised a hand. "We will consider this proposal. Lieutenant Scott, you and young Montgomery will be our guests tonight. Tomorrow we will give our answer." As the meeting dispersed, Kaya approached under the pretext of showing them where they would stay. "You took a great risk coming here," she said quietly to Ethan. "Worth every moment," he replied, earning a sharp look from Scott. "My father wishes to speak with you privately," she continued. "After the evening meal, he has questions." Ethan's stomach tightened with apprehension. "About us?" Kaya nodded, her expression troubled. "Neshoba has been speaking against me, suggesting I have been compromised by my contact with whites." She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "Be careful what you say. My position here is becoming precarious." "I would never do anything to endanger you," Ethan assured her. Her smile was sad. "I know, but sometimes the heart leads where wisdom fears to follow." The evening meal was a tense affair. Ethan and Scott were given places of honor near Blackhawk, but the atmosphere was far from welcoming. Neshoba and his supporters sat opposite them, their hostile glares making their sentiments clear. After the meal, as promised, Ethan was summoned to Blackhawk's dwelling. Scott moved to accompany him, but the chief's attendant made it clear that the invitation was for Ethan alone. "Be diplomatic," Scott warned, as Ethan rose to follow the attendant. "Remember everything I taught you about Apache etiquette." Inside the dwelling, the air was thick with herbal smoke. Medicinal, Ethan realized, noticing several clay pots bubbling near the small central fire. Blackhawk sat on a raised platform of woven mats, looking even more frail without the formal trappings of his public appearance. To Ethan's surprise, Kaya was also present, sitting slightly behind her father. She gave Ethan a warning look that he interpreted as a caution to mind his words. "Sit," Blackhawk instructed, gesturing to a mat. Before him, Ethan sat cross-legged, as he had seen others do, trying to mimic the respectful posture Scott had demonstrated. "My daughter tells me you are different from other white men," Blackhawk began without preamble, "that you seek understanding rather than conquest. I believe there is wisdom in your culture that mine has forgotten," Ethan replied carefully. "And I believe peaceful coexistence is possible." "Pretty words," Blackhawk observed, "but words are wind. Actions reveal truth." He leaned forward, studying Ethan intently. "What are your intentions toward my daughter?" The directness of the question caught Ethan off guard. He glanced at Kaya, who remained expressionless. "Honesty," Blackhawk commanded. "Nothing less." Ethan took a deep breath. "I care for her," he admitted. "More than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances, but I would never do anything to bring her harm or dishonor." The chief nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already knew. "And if I told you that any relationship between you would bring her both harm and dishonor among our people?" "Then I would respect your judgment," Ethan said, though the words pained him. "Her well-being must come before my feelings." Kaya's eyes widened slightly at this declaration, a flicker of emotion crossing her face before she composed herself again. "An unexpected answer from Jackson Montgomery's son," Blackhawk mused. "Your father would take what he wanted regardless of consequence." "As I said, I am not my father," Ethan repeated. Blackhawk coughed violently, and Kaya immediately moved to his side, supporting him and offering a small clay cup of medicine. After drinking, the chief seemed to recover somewhat. "I am dying," he said matter-of-factly. "Not news to anyone in this camp, though we pretend otherwise." He gestured toward the camp outside. "When I am gone, there will be a power struggle. Neshoba leads those who wish to return to the old ways, raiding, fighting, dying proudly rather than living cautiously. And Kaya represents your vision for the future," Ethan guessed. "She is wise beyond her years," Blackhawk confirmed. "But she is a woman, and there are many who believe leadership should pass to a warrior." "What can I do to help?" Ethan asked. Blackhawk exchanged a look with his daughter before responding. "Lieutenant Scott's proposal has merit. If we help eliminate the threat of broken knife, it strengthens the position of those who favor continued peace." He fixed Ethan with a penetrating gaze. "But we need assurances that the army will honor its part, that our cooperation will be rewarded with respect for our boundaries, not further encroachment." "Colonel Garrett is a man of his word," Ethan said. "But I can't speak for the territorial governor or Washington." "No one can," Blackhawk agreed, "which is why trust must be built on personal bonds, not political promises." He gestured between Ethan and Kaya. "The connection between you could serve a greater purpose than your own. Happiness." Ethan frowned, not understanding. "He means," Kaya explained quietly, "that our friendship could become a bridge between our peoples, a symbol of possibility." "Or a target for those who hate on both sides," Ethan pointed out. "Yes," Blackhawk acknowledged, "which is why it must remain secret for now, known only to those who can be trusted absolutely." He straightened, seeming to gather his remaining strength. "I will accept Garrett's proposal on one condition. You, Ethan Montgomery, will act as liaison between my people and the army." "Me?" Ethan asked, startled. "I have no official position. Yet you have Garrett's ear, and through him the governor's," Blackhawk countered. "And you have reason to ensure our collaboration succeeds." His eyes flickered meaningfully to Kaya. Ethan understood the implicit bargain. His relationship with Kaya would be tolerated, perhaps even quietly encouraged, as long as he used his influence to protect her people's interests. "I accept," he said firmly. Blackhawk nodded, satisfied. "Then it is agreed. We will provide scouts to help track Broken Knife, and you will ensure our cooperation is recognized." As Ethan left the dwelling, his mind reeled with the implications of what had just transpired. He had entered hoping merely for Blackhawk's blessing to continue seeing Kaya. He had emerged as an informal diplomat with responsibilities he barely comprehended. Outside, Scott was waiting anxiously. "Well, what happened?" "Chief Blackhawk will accept the joint patrol proposal," Ethan reported. "With conditions." Scott looked relieved. "Good, what conditions?" Before Ethan could answer, shouting erupted from the edge of the camp. Warriors rushed toward the commotion, weapons drawn. "What's happening?" Ethan asked the nearest person, an elderly man who had remained behind. "Intruders," the man replied in broken English. "Caught watching camp." Scott and Ethan exchanged alarmed glances before following the crowd. In the clearing, two men were being held at knife point, forced to their knees before Neshoba. Ethan's blood ran cold as he recognized them, ranch hands from Montgomery land. Seeing him, one of the captives called out desperately, "Ethan, tell them we work for your father. Tell them we're not spies." Neshoba turned slowly, his expression darkening as he connected the dots. "Your father sent them," he accused Ethan. "To spy on us while you distract us with talk of peace?" "No," Ethan protested. "I knew nothing about this." But the damage was done. Throughout the camp, weapons were being readied, women gathering children, warriors assembling. The fragile trust Ethan had built was unraveling before his eyes. Kaya emerged from her father's dwelling, taking in the scene with growing horror. Her eyes met Ethan's across the clearing, a look of betrayal that cut him more deeply than any. "Blade! Take them to the holding pen," Neshoba ordered, pointing to the captured ranch hands. "Double the guards around the perimeter. If there are 2 spies, there may be more." The camp erupted into organized chaos as warriors moved to secure the boundaries, while women gathered children into the central dwellings. Ethan stepped forward, desperate to salvage the situation. "They're not spies," he insisted. "They're ranch. Hands from my father's property. Let me speak with them." "You will go nowhere near them," Neshoba countered, his hand resting on his knife. "Your treachery is now clear to all," Lieutenant Scott intervened. "This is a misunderstanding that can be resolved peacefully. Chief Blackhawk should be consulted before any actions are taken." The mention of the chief seemed to give Neshoba pause. He glanced toward Blackhawk's dwelling, where the elderly leader had emerged, leaning heavily on Kaya for support. "Father," Kaya called, her voice carrying authority despite the tension. "We must hear all sides before judgment is passed." Blackhawk nodded weakly. "Bring the intruders to the council circle, and young Montgomery as well. Let truth be spoken before all." Neshoba looked as if he might object, but instead bowed his head, in deference. "As you wish, Chief." The council circle was quickly assembled, with Blackhawk seated on an elevated platform, tribal elders flanking him on either side. Ethan and Scott were positioned opposite the chief, while the 2 ranch hands, Jonas, Fletcher and Will Donovan, knelt between them, their hands bound behind their backs. "Speak," Blackhawk commanded, addressing the captives directly. "Why do you trespass on Apache land?" Fletcher, the older of the 2, swallowed nervously. "We meant no disrespect, sir. We were following orders." "Whose orders?" Blackhawk pressed. Fletcher's. Eyes darted to Ethan before answering. "Mr. Montgomery's, Jackson Montgomery." A murmur ran through the gathered Apache. Ethan felt the weight of suspicious glares upon him. "And what were these orders?" Blackhawk continued. "To follow his son," Donovan blurted out, "to see where he went and who he met with." Ethan's stomach dropped. His father hadn't just been tracking him, he'd been spying on him. The implications were devastating. "Did you report back to Jackson Montgomery about our previous meetings?" Kaya asked Ethan directly, her voice controlled, but her eyes betraying her hurt. "No," Ethan exclaimed. "I knew nothing about this. I swear it." "The son of Jackson Montgomery claims ignorance of his father's schemes," Neshoba scoffed. "How convenient." "I believe him," Lieutenant Scott interjected. "Montgomery volunteered for this mission against his father's wishes. There's been obvious tension between them. which could all be part of an elaborate deception, Neshoba countered. Perhaps the army is complicit as well. Scott bristled at the accusation. I've spent years building trust with your people, Neshoba. I wouldn't squander that for a Montgomery family feud. Blackhawk raised a hand for silence. What exactly were you to observe and report back? He asked the ranch hands. Fletcher looked miserable. Mr. Montgomery, the father, was concerned about his son's involvement with an Apache woman. He wanted confirmation. All eyes turned to Kaya, who maintained her composure despite the public exposure of what had been a carefully guarded secret. And what have you seen to report? Blackhawk asked. Nothing improper, Fletcher answered quickly. We've been following at a distance for days. Just saw them enter your camp today. We were waiting for them to leave again when your scouts found us. They speak the truth, confirmed one of the Apache warriors who had captured them. They carried no weapons, only water and food. They made no move toward our camp. Blackhawk fell into a contemplative silence, broken only by his labored breathing. Finally, he spoke. The actions of a father concerned for his son are understandable, even if his methods are not honorable. He fixed Ethan with a penetrating gaze. Did you know of this surveillance? No, Chief Blackhawk, Ethan replied firmly. My father and I disagree about many things, especially regarding relations with your people. Had I known he was having me followed, I would have confronted him directly. Blackhawk nodded slowly. I believe you, Ethan Montgomery, but this complicates our arrangement. What arrangement? Neshoba demanded, looking between Blackhawk and Ethan with suspicion. Chief Blackhawk has agreed to provide scouts to help track Broken Knife's band, Scott explained, in exchange for assurances of respect for Apache boundaries. With Montgomery as liaison, Neshoba guessed, his tone making clear his disapproval. A man whose own father does not trust him. The very reason he may be ideal, Blackhawk countered, he stands between worlds, beholden to neither fully. Or trustworthy to neither, Neshoba muttered, though loud enough for all to hear. Kaya stepped forward. What will be done with these men? She asked, gesturing to the ranch hands. They will be our guests until we determine they pose no threat, Blackhawk decided. 3 days. Then they will be released with a message for Jackson Montgomery. Apache land remains Apache land. Those who enter uninvited risk more than capture next time. The council disbanded shortly after, with Fletcher and Donovan being led to a guarded dwelling. As the crowd dispersed, Kaya approached Ethan, her expression unreadable. I need to speak with you, she said quietly. Alone. Lieutenant Scott overheard and frowned. That might not be wise, given the circumstances. I will accept the consequences, Kaya replied firmly. Meet me by the medicine lodge when the moon reaches its peak, she told Ethan before walking away. Scott sighed heavily. You're playing with fire, Montgomery. I know, Ethan acknowledged, but some fires are worth getting burned for. The medicine lodge stood slightly apart from the main camp, a sacred structure used for healing rituals and spiritual ceremonies. As Ethan approached, he spotted Kaya waiting in the shadows, her silhouette illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the trees. We shouldn't be here, she said as he drew near. This place is reserved for medicine men and those seeking healing. Perhaps that's fitting, Ethan replied, because I think we both need some healing right now. Kaya led him to a secluded clearing just beyond the lodge. Did you truly not know your father was having you? I swear it, Ethan said earnestly. Though I should have anticipated it, my father has never accepted barriers to his will, physical or moral. Kaya studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her. I believe you, but this changes things, Ethan. Our meeting in the Box Canyon wasn't as private as we thought. Who knows what Fletcher and Donovan observed or what they've already reported back to your father? The implications chilled Ethan to the bone. If his father had confirmation of his relationship with Kaya, he would stop at nothing to end it. "What should we do?" he asked. "First, we must honor the agreement my father made," Kaya said pragmatically. "The joint patrols against Broken Knife must proceed. It's the only way to prevent wider conflict." "And us?" Ethan pressed. Kaya's expression softened. "My feelings haven't changed, but the danger has increased tenfold." She took his hands in hers. "My father was right about one thing. Our connection could be a bridge between our peoples, or it could be the spark that ignites a war." "I won't let that happen," Ethan vowed. "It may not be in our power to prevent," Kaya cautioned. "Nashoba and his followers already whisper that I've been corrupted by my association with whites. If they learned the true nature of our relationship, they'd use it to challenge your father's leadership." Ethan finished grimly. Kaya nodded. "And on your side, your father would see it as the ultimate betrayal. The Montgomery name means everything to him." "Not to me," Ethan said firmly. "I'd renounce it entirely if that's what it took to be with you." Kaya placed a gentle hand on his cheek. "That's the kind of declaration that makes me love you," she said softly, "and fear for you at the same time." It was the first time either had spoken of love aloud, and the word hung between them, powerful and dangerous. "Then we'll be careful," Ethan promised. "More careful than before. We'll meet only when absolutely necessary, through official channels." "Until my father's health improves," Kaya agreed, though they both knew that was unlikely to happen. "Or until we find another way." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their situation pressing down upon them. Then, as if by mutual understanding, they moved into each other's arms, their embrace communicating what words could not, the depth of their feelings and the pain of their circumstances. "I should go back," Kaya whispered reluctantly. "If I'm missing—" Ethan nodded, releasing her. "When will I see you again?" "The scouts will depart for Fort Benton in 2 days to begin the joint patrols," she replied. "I've convinced my father to let me serve as a translator. It's a role I've filled before, so it won't arouse suspicion." "Be careful," Ethan cautioned. "Nashoba is watching your every move, as your father is watching yours," Kaya reminded him. She began to step away, then turned back impulsively, pressing a small woven band into his palm. "Keep this hidden, but close. It's a protection charm. My mother made it before she died." The gift moved Ethan deeply. "I'll treasure it," he promised. With a final, lingering look, Kaya melted into the darkness, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the weight of their increasingly complicated situation. Jackson Montgomery paced the length of his study, pausing occasionally to glare out the window at the distant mountains where the Apache made their home. It had been 5 days since he'd sent Fletcher and Donovan to follow Ethan, and their failure to return spoke volumes. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. "Enter!" he barked. Burke appeared, his expression grave. "Ryder from Fort Benton. Just arrived with news. Thought you should hear it immediately." "Speak," Jackson commanded. "Your son is alive and well," Burke began, correctly guessing Jackson's primary concern, despite his outward anger. "But Fletcher and Donovan were captured by the Apache while observing their camp." Jackson's face darkened. "Captured or killed?" "Captured," Burke confirmed. "According to the message, they're being held for 3 days and then released as a warning." "A warning," Jackson repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "To me, on my own land." "The message came from Colonel Garrett," Burke continued. "Apparently your son and Lieutenant Scott successfully negotiated some kind of arrangement with Black Hawk. Joint patrols against Broken Knife's renegades." Jackson slammed his fist on the desk. "My son has no authority to negotiate anything with those savages." "Garrett seems to think otherwise," Burke said cautiously. The message indicates Ethan is serving as civilian liaison between the Army and the Apache. Liaison, Jackson scoffed. Is that what they're calling it? And what of the girl? Was there mention of her? Burke shifted uncomfortably. No specific mention, but the rider had heard rumors. Blackhawk's daughter is serving as translator for the Apache Scouts. She and your son will be working closely together. Jackson's face became a mask of cold fury. So my son defies me openly now, conspiring with the Apache against his own family. I'm not sure that's fair, Jackson, Burke ventured. By all accounts, he's trying to prevent a wider conflict. By sleeping with the enemy? Jackson snapped. Don't be naive, Thomas. This isn't about peace. It's about rebellion against me, against everything I've built. He moved to the cabinet behind his desk, unlocking it to reveal a map of the territory. The cattle drive returns in 2 weeks. When it does, we'll move our plan forward, Burke frowned. What plan? The one we've discussed for years, Jackson replied, tracing a finger along the eastern boundary of his property, the land that bordered Apache territory. The governor has finally approved my petition for the cavalry to establish a new outpost, here at Eagle Pass. Once it's built, the Apache will be effectively cut off from their winter hunting grounds. Jackson, that will force them into starvation or conflict, Burke protested. It's a direct violation of the treaty boundaries. Treaties change, Jackson said dismissively. The territorial governor agrees that security concerns outweigh outdated agreements. Broken Knife's raids have provided the perfect pretext. And your son's involvement with the Apache. Jackson's expression hardened. A complication that will be resolved. Once the outpost is established, Blackhawk will understand that cooperation with whites, especially romantic entanglements, only leads to disaster for his people. You'd use military force to separate your son from this woman? Burke asked incredulously. I'd use whatever means necessary to protect my legacy, Jackson corrected. Ethan will thank me one day, once this youthful infatuation has passed. Burke looked troubled. And if it's more than infatuation, then he's even more of a fool than I feared, Jackson replied coldly, and fools must be protected from themselves. The fort buzzed with unusual activity as Apache scouts arrived, led by Lieutenant Scott and accompanied by Kaya as translator. Ethan had ridden ahead to prepare Colonel Garrett for their arrival, explaining the delicate political balance they had achieved. This is unprecedented, Garrett remarked as they watched the Apache delegation approach from the parade ground. Blackhawk must trust you more than I anticipated. He trusts his daughter, Ethan corrected. She has vouched for me. Garrett gave him a sidelong glance. Yes, I've heard rumors about that. Care to elaborate? No, sir, Ethan replied firmly. Except to say that mutual respect has formed the foundation of our diplomatic progress. Diplomatic? Garrett repeated with a knowing smile. Very well, I won't pry into the details of your diplomacy. But be careful, Montgomery. The territorial governor is watching this experiment closely. Success could mean a new model for Apache relations. Throughout the territory, failure could mean... He left the sentence unfinished. I understand the stakes, Colonel, Ethan assured him. The Apache contingent consisted of 6 warriors, each selected for their tracking skills and familiarity with Broken Knife's tactics. Kaya rode slightly apart, her posture regal despite the wary glances from soldiers as they entered the fort. The formal welcome was brief but respectful, with Garrett acknowledging each scout by name, a gesture that clearly surprised and pleased them. Afterward, as the Apache were shown to their quarters, Ethan managed a moment alone with Kaya under the pretext of discussing translation needs. "How is your father?" he asked, maintaining a professional distance despite his desire to embrace. "Her weaker," Kaya replied softly. "The journey to the council circle exhausted him. The medicine man gives him perhaps a month, no more." "I'm sorry," Ethan said sincerely. "Has Neshoba made any moves against you?" "Not openly. But he spreads, whispers, questions my loyalty. She straightened her shoulders. That is why this mission must succeed. If we can eliminate the threat of Broken Knife, it strengthens those who favor peace. Ethan nodded. The first patrol leaves at dawn. I'll be accompanying you. Is that wise? Kaya asked, concern evident in her voice. Your presence might complicate matters with the scouts. Colonel Garrett insists, Ethan explained. As liaison, I need to witness the operation firsthand. Besides, he added with a hint of a smile, someone needs to protect Lieutenant Scott from cultural misunderstandings. A shadow of amusement crossed Kaya's face. The lieutenant is more culturally aware than most, but your presence will be reassuring. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger. Mr. Montgomery, the young soldier called. Telegram from Copper Creek, marked urgently. Ethan excused himself, taking the folded paper with a sense of foreboding. As he read its contents, his expression darkened. Bad news? Kaya asked when he returned. My father, Ethan replied grimly. He's calling me home immediately, family emergency. Will you go? Ethan hesitated. I have to, if only to confront him about Fletcher and Donovan. He lowered his voice. And to find out what he knows about us. Kaya nodded, understanding the necessity. When will you return? Before the patrol departs, Ethan promised. Nothing will keep me from that. As he prepared to leave, Lieutenant Scott approached with a warning. Be careful at home, Montgomery. Your father isn't known for his understanding of nature. If he suspects the extent of your involvement with the Apache, I can handle my father, Ethan insisted, though with less confidence than he would have liked. For your sake and for hers. I hope so, Scott replied, glancing meaningfully toward Kaya. Because if Jackson Montgomery decides to make this personal, it won't just be your relationship at stake. It could be the peace of the entire territory. The journey to Copper Creek took most of the day, with Ethan pushing his horse harder than he should have. As he approached the small settlement, he was surprised to see his father's distinctive black stallion tied outside the saloon. Inside, Jackson Montgomery sat alone at a corner table, nursing a whiskey. He showed no surprise when Ethan entered. You got my telegram, he observed coolly. What's the emergency? Ethan demanded, remaining standing. Jackson gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit down, son. We need to talk. Reluctantly, Ethan complied. If this is about Fletcher and Donovan, this is about you, Jackson interrupted, and the dangerous game you're playing with that Apache girl. Ethan's jaw tightened. Her name is Kaya, and there's no game. Then you're even more of a fool than I feared, Jackson said, echoing his earlier words to Burke. What do you imagine is the end game here? Marriage? Children? A little half-breed family living happily on Montgomery land? The crude language made Ethan's blood boil. Don't you dare speak of her that way. I'll speak however I please about the savage who's bewitched my son, Jackson retorted. But I didn't bring you here to argue. I brought you here to offer you a choice. What choice? Jackson leaned forward. End this association immediately and return to the ranch where you belong, or continue down this path and face the consequences. What consequences? Ethan challenged. I've petitioned the territorial governor for a new cavalry outpost at Eagle Pass, Jackson revealed. He's approved it. Construction begins next month. The significance wasn't lost on Ethan. That's Apache, a land under the treaty, their winter hunting grounds. Treaties change, Jackson said dismissively, but this particular change can be reconsidered if you make the right choice. Ethan stared at his father in disbelief. You're using military policy as leverage against your own son. I'm using every tool at my disposal to save you from yourself, Jackson corrected, and to protect what generations of Montgomerys have built. By starving innocent people, by forcing them into conflict they can't win. Ethan stood abruptly. You're not protecting anything, you're destroying everything worth protecting. Sit down, Jackson ordered. No, Ethan refused. I'm done taking orders from you. You don't control me, and you don't control the future of this territory. Don't I? Jackson laughed mirthlessly. The governor listens to me. Colonel Garrett, for all his diplomatic posturing, answers to the governor. Your Apache friends are living on borrowed time, son. The only question is how hard their fall will be. You're wrong, Ethan insisted. Peace is possible. Coexistence is possible. Not while I draw breath, Jackson replied with chilling finality. You have 3 days to make your decision. Return home and take your rightful place as my heir, or watch as I systematically destroy everything and everyone you've come to care about. Ethan turned to leave, disgusted by his father's threats. Oh, and Ethan, Jackson called after him. If you warn her or her people about my plans, I'll know, and I'll consider that your answer. Outside in the gathering darkness, Ethan mounted his horse with shaking hands. His father had just declared war, not just on the Apache, but on Ethan's very future. And in doing so, he had forced Ethan into an impossible choice: betray the woman he loved or betray his own flesh and blood. The territorial courthouse buzzed with activity as lawyers, witnesses, and spectators filed in for what the newspapers had dubbed the trial of the century. Unlike the hasty proceedings that had nearly sent Ethan and Kaya to the gallows, this was a formal hearing with federal observers present, a direct result of the evidence Ethan had gathered about treaty violations and corruption. Governor Fletcher sat uncomfortably at the defendant's table, his once immaculate suit now rumpled from weeks of scrutiny. Beside him, several territorial officials fidgeted nervously as they awaited the judge's arrival. In the gallery, Ethan sat with Lieutenant Scott, while Kaya sat with a delegation of Apache elders who had been granted safe passage to observe the proceedings. The death of Chief Blackhawk a week earlier had accelerated the political shifts within the tribe, with moderate voices gaining unexpected influence after Neshoba's surprising defense of Kaya. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge William Harmon, sent directly from Washington, entered the courtroom. Unlike Fleming, Harmon had a reputation for fairness and adherence to the letter of the law. His first official act had been to formally dismiss all charges against Ethan and Kaya, declaring the previous proceedings a mockery of justice, influenced by personal vendetta rather than legal principle. Now he would rule on the more complex matter of treaty violations and the proposed outpost at Eagle Pass. Before I render my decision, Harmon announced after the preliminary statements, I wish to hear from Mr. Montgomery and Miss Redbird, as they have been most directly affected by these events. Ethan approached the witness stand first, the courtroom falling silent as he spoke of his journey from privileged ignorance to painful awareness of the injustices perpetrated against the Apache. He detailed his father's schemes without flinching, though Jackson Montgomery was notably absent from the proceedings, having retreated to the ranch after his public humiliation. When Kaya took the stand, her quiet dignity commanded attention. She spoke not of revenge or punishment, but of honoring agreements and building a future where both peoples could thrive. My father believed coexistence was possible, she concluded, her gaze sweeping across the room. His dying wish was that I continue that vision, no matter the personal cost. Judge Harmon deliberated for less than an hour before delivering his ruling. The treaty boundaries would be upheld, the outpost at Eagle Pass permanently cancelled, and a formal investigation launched into corruption within the territorial government. Outside the courthouse, Ethan found Kaya speaking with Neshoba, their conversation intense but no longer hostile. He has proposed a compromise, Kaya explained as Ethan approached. A trading post at Shadow Canyon, jointly operated by Apache and whites, with regulations to protect both interests. You would trust whites on your land again? Ethan asked Neshoba, surprised by this change in attitude. Not all whites, Neshoba replied, his expression still guarded, but those who have proven their word has value. He glanced at Lieutenant Scott, who was conferring with Colonel Garrett nearby, "and those who have shed blood beside us against common enemies." "It's a beginning," Kaya said softly, "a fragile one, but real." The sacred cave looked just as it had when Kaya first showed it to Ethan, the ancient painting still bearing witness to generations of Apache history. Now, by the light of a single torch, Kaya added new pigments to the wall, symbols representing recent events, including the confrontation with Broken Knife, the near execution, and the court victory. "My turn?" Ethan asked when she stepped back to examine her work. Kaya nodded, handing him a small clay pot of red ochre. "Add your mark to our story." With careful strokes, Ethan added a simple symbol beside Kaya's more elaborate ones, 2 circles, intersecting to form a shared space between separate worlds. "Perfect," Kaya whispered, leaning against him as they admired their contributions to the canyon's ancient record. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their moment of peace. Outside the cave, they found Margaret Montgomery disembarking, accompanied by Thomas Burke. "Mother," Ethan said in surprise, "how did you find us?" "Mr. Burke knows these canyons well," Margaret replied, her eyes taking in Kaya with newfound curiosity. "And Lieutenant Scott provided general directions." "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked, noting his mother's tense expression. Margaret hesitated before answering. "Your father has suffered an apoplexy. The doctor says he may not recover fully." The news hit Ethan like a physical blow. Despite everything, Jackson Montgomery was still his father. "How bad is it?" "He cannot speak or move his right side," Margaret explained, "but his mind remains sharp, according to the doctor." Her gaze shifted to Kaya. "He has asked to see you both." "Both?" Ethan repeated incredulously. Margaret nodded. His exact words, as best he could manage, were, "Bring my son and the Apache woman." Kaya and Ethan exchanged uncertain glances. "It could be a trap," Kaya suggested cautiously. Burke shook his head. "No trap, Miss Redbird. Jackson is changed by his condition, humbled, perhaps for the first time in his life." "Will you come?" Margaret asked, her question directed as much to Kaya as to Ethan. After a moment's consideration, Kaya nodded. "I will come, out of respect for your journey here, and for the suffering of a father." The Montgomery ranch house seemed smaller somehow, its grandeur diminished by the pall of illness that hung over it. Servants moved quietly through the hallways, speaking in hushed tones as Margaret led Ethan and Kaya to the master bedroom. Jackson Montgomery lay propped against pillows, his once imposing frame now diminished, the right side of his face frozen in a permanent droop. His eyes, however, remained sharp and aware, tracking their entrance with keen interest. "Father," Ethan greeted him, approaching the bedside. Jackson's left hand moved slightly in acknowledgement. His gaze shifted to Kaya, who stood respectfully at a distance. "Closer," he managed to say, the words slurred but understandable. Kaya stepped forward until she stood beside Ethan. Jackson studied her face intently, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Your father," he said with visible effort. "A good man." The unexpected question caught Kaya by surprise. "Yes," she answered simply, "a great chief and a wise father." Jackson nodded slowly. "Mine was cruel." The admission seemed to cost him considerable effort. "Made me same." Margaret gasped softly at this unprecedented display of vulnerability from her husband. Ethan found himself speechless, never having imagined his father capable of such self-reflection. With trembling fingers, Jackson reached for a folded document on the bedside table. Margaret helped him retrieve it and handed it to Ethan. "Open," Jackson instructed. Ethan unfolded the paper to find a legal deed transferring ownership of 1,000 acres along the eastern boundary, the land bordering Apache territory, jointly, to Ethan Montgomery and Kaya Redbird. Neutral ground, Jackson explained haltingly, for trading post, new beginning. The gesture left Ethan stunned. It represented not just a financial gift, but a profound ideological concession from a man who had spent his life consuming land rather than sharing it. Why? Ethan asked, needing to understand this transformation. Jackson's eyes, filled with a lifetime of regrets, met his son's. Saw you, on Gallows, ready to die, for principle. His gaze shifted to include Kaya. Both of you. Brave. A single tear tracked down his paralyzed cheek. Proud. The admission broke something open in Ethan, a wound that had festered his entire life, the desperate need for his father's approval that he had never acknowledged, even to himself. Kaya, sensing the emotional significance of the moment, stepped forward and placed her hand on Jackson's. "Thank you," she said simply. "This land will become a bridge between our peoples, as your son has been a bridge between our hearts." The trading post at Shadow Canyon had grown from a simple structure to a thriving community center where Apache and settlers met to exchange goods, information, and gradually cultural understanding. The neutral ground, established by Jackson Montgomery's unexpected gift, had become a model that other communities along the frontier were beginning to emulate. Ethan and Kaya had built a home that incorporated elements of both cultures. A sturdy cabin with traditional Apache design elements, situated where they could observe both the mountains and the plains. On this particular evening, they stood together watching the sunset paint the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. Lieutenant Scott, now Captain Scott after his promotion, approached on horseback accompanied by an Apache scout. "Quite a sight," Scott commented, dismounting to join them. "Hard to believe how much has changed in less than a year." "Some things haven't changed," Ethan noted, nodding toward Copper Creek in the distance, where the new territorial governor was scheduled to visit. "There's still resistance to what we're building here." "But less than before," Scott countered. "The joint patrols have reduced raids to almost nothing. Trade is flourishing. Even the most hard-line settlers are starting to see the benefits of cooperation." Kaya smiled, her hand resting protectively over her slightly swollen belly, a new life growing within her, the first of a generation that would truly belong to both worlds. "My father once told me that change comes slowly, like water shaping. Stone," she said, "not in a single flood, but in countless small drops over time." As darkness fell, fires were lit around the trading post, and members of both communities gathered for an unprecedented celebration, the formal peace accord between the territorial government and the Apache Nation, with the Shadow Canyon model at its center. Ethan took Kaya's hand as they walked toward the gathering. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "The price you've paid for this path?" Kaya considered the question, thinking of her father's legacy, the suspicion she still faced from some of her people, the uncertain future their child would navigate. "No," she said finally. "Standing on that gallows with you, I understood something important. True freedom isn't about avoiding death. It's about choosing what's worth living for." She squeezed his hand. "And I chose well." As they joined the celebration, Apache songs mingled with settler music, creating a harmony that, while imperfect, suggested possibilities that neither culture alone could have imagined. The story of the rancher's son and the Apache princess had become more than a scandal or a tragedy. It had become a beginning. Above them, stars emerged in the vast Arizona sky, ancient light journeying across impossible distances, illuminating a landscape where boundaries were slowly dissolving into understanding, and where hearts, against all odds, had finally learned to love freely. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.